My name is Michael. I'm not the kind of guy who snoops. Never have been. I've always believed that trust is something you give fully, or not at all, no halfway measures. For the longest time, that's how I lived with Linda. We had been together for 6 years, married for 4, and I never once questioned her loyalty. That's what makes this story hard to tell. Because the signs were always there. I just didn't want to believe them. It started on a Saturday morning in late April, one of those unusually warm spring days where even the air feels lighter. We were getting ready to head out for her aunt's birthday barbecue. Just your average family gathering. Linda was bustling around the bedroom, throwing shoes into a duffel and muttering about forgetting to grab wine for the hostess. I offered to get the cooler out of the garage while she got ready. I walked into the kitchen, intending to grab sunscreen from her tote bag. We were going to be outside all afternoon. I reached in without thinking. That's when my fingers brushed against a small, crumpled slip of paper. I pulled it out, figuring it was a grocery receipt or maybe something she needed me to toss. But the moment I unfolded it, I felt my stomach drop. It was a receipt from the Valley Inn small hotel tucked off Highway 6. Not a chain, not a conference spot, not even the kind of place you go to for a quick drink. No, this was the kind of place people go to be unseen. The timestamp hit me first. Thursday night, 7:46 p.m., room 204. I blinked. Thursday night, she'd told me, was yoga and a late dinner with the girls. She came home around 10:30, still in her gym clothes, hair damp like she'd showered. I remember because she hugged me from behind while I was doing dishes and said she was exhausted but happy. K***ler class, she told me. I just stared at the receipt like it would rewrite itself. She came into the room, zipping up a dress bag. Ready. I held it up. What's this? Linda's reaction didn't come with a pause. No hesitation. That somehow made it worse. She glanced at the receipt, then rolled her eyes with a casual smile that didn't touch her eyes. Oh, that's Melanie's. Her sister kicked her out of their place after some huge blow-up, and she didn't have anywhere to go. I helped her check into a room. Paid for it on my card, since her wallet was in her sister's car. Totally chaotic. Can you believe that? She laughed. A little too loud, a little too fast. Then she turned to the mirror, applying lip gloss like we weren't standing in a moment that would eventually burn itself into my memory. I didn't say anything. Not right away. My brain was still trying to catch up. The math didn't work. If she was at yoga and dinner until 10:30, how did she find time to drop off Melanie at a hotel at 7:46? I opened my mouth, but she cut me off before a full sentence could form. We're gonna be late if we don't leave soon. Can you grab the wine? And just like that, she moved past me, past the receipt, past the question, redirecting, reframing. It wasn't defensive. It was practiced. And idiot that I was, obeyed. I grabbed the wine. I grabbed the cooler. I got in the car. But I didn't forget. In the moment, I told myself it wasn't worth ruining the day. Family was expecting us. We were already running late. It wasn't the time or place to start a fight. That was the narrative I chose. But deep down, something in me had already changed. I just hadn't realized how much. I spent the entire car ride trying to figure out if I was the kind of man who could ignore what I'd seen. The kind of man who swallows his instincts to keep the peace. Because up until then, I'd always told myself I'd know if something was wrong. I'd feel it. I'd see it. I'd know. Turns out, knowing and accepting are two different things. I glanced over at Linda as she drove. She was humming to herself, tapping the steering wheel with her fingers like she always did when she was excited to see her family. She looked relaxed, effortless, like someone who had nothing to hide. And that, more than anything else, is what made me feel like a fool. I kept the receipt in my pocket. Not for proof. Not even as a reminder. Just because I couldn't let it go. Because it marked the exact moment I stopped being sure of my wife. I tried to tell myself that maybe she was telling the truth. Maybe Melanie really was in a mess and needed help. Maybe Linda had left yoga early, driven across town to help her friend, and then met up with the group after. Maybe all those inconsistencies were just bad timing. Maybe I was just overthinking. But that's the problem when the seed of doubt gets planted, it doesn't shrink. It grows. I remembered other moments, other half-truths that had never fully added up. Nights she came home smelling like a cologne I didn't wear. Times she claimed her phone died even though she'd been active on Instagram minutes before. Her new passcode. Her reluctance to let me charge her phone when it was dying. The new friend group I never met. The sudden interest in late-night yoga classes that never lined up with the studio's actual schedule. Something I only noticed once but didn't think much of. All of it had felt like noise before. Random, explainable noise. But the receipt made it a pattern. And the way she brushed it off, the way she instantly had a story, one that was just vague enough to sound real, told me she'd had practice. Still, I didn't confront her again. I didn't call Melanie. I didn't ask to see a credit card statement. I didn't push. I folded the receipt and put it in my wallet, sliding it between a coffee shop punch card and a faded photo of us at Niagara Falls. She had her arms wrapped around me in that photo, her head tilted just right. I used to think that was what trust looked like. That morning, as we pulled into her aunt's driveway, I felt the weight of the photo more than the receipt, because something told me I'd never look at it the same again. On the drive to Linda's aunt's house, I stared out the window, my thoughts miles away. The spring sun flickered between trees as we moved down the two-lane road, but I barely saw it. All I could see were pieces. Small, disconnected, quiet moments that had seemed meaningless before but now played on loop in my mind, each one taking on a darker shade. It's strange how your brain rewrites things when you're forced to see the bigger picture. It doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in quietly, like fog. The first memory that surfaced was from 3 months prior, a Friday evening when Linda came home late. I remember it clearly because I had made dinner for the two of us. Penne arrabbiata. She loved it spicy, just shy of painful. I waited over an hour past when she said she'd be home, the pasta clumping into a cold heap in the pot. When she finally walked through the door, she was flustered, hair windblown, cheeks flushed, and she smelled different. Not just perfume, but something subtle, musky. A scent I didn't recognize. Her excuse was the usual. Work ran late. Drinks after with Marla and Jess. Sorry, I should have texted. I remember nodding, saying it was fine. But even then, something didn't sit right. She barely touched the food, even though she used to clean her plate every time I made that dish. That was the first time I noticed her looking at her phone with a kind of caution, tilting the screen away whenever I came close. I chalked it up to stress. I was always doing that, explaining away things that didn't feel good in my gut. The next image that flashed in my mind was from a Saturday morning 2 weeks after that. I'd woken up before her and offered to take her car in for a wash, something I did from time to time. She practically bolted out of bed, saying she had errands to run. "You'll have your hands full with the lawn anyway," she said, already slipping into her jeans. Struck me as odd. Not the timing, but the urgency, like she was afraid of what I might find. I told myself she was just being independent. Now, I wasn't so sure. Another memory, mid-March. A Friday again. Fridays were starting to feel cursed in retrospect. I had suggested we stay in, maybe watch a movie. She said she had a work thing, a team dinner. I think were her exact words. I offered to come, not seriously, more as a gesture. She gave me this quick smile and said, "It's just employees. No spouses. Boring stuff, I promise." That night, she came home well past midnight, quietly enough that I only woke when she slid into bed. I pretended to be asleep, but I could hear her trying not to breathe too loudly. I could also smell the alcohol and something sharper, again, not her perfume. It was the same scent I'd catch from time to time in the laundry, always faint but never familiar. As we drove to the party, I watched her out of the corner of my eye. She was tapping through her phone, fingers flying quickly, her face lit up by the glow of the screen. I'd stopped asking who she was texting a while ago. The answers were always vague. Just Jen? Or work chat. It didn't matter what name she used, it always meant the same thing. End of conversation. At some point, she changed her phone password. That had never happened before. Linda used to leave her phone face up on the coffee table. She used to hand it to me to skip songs when we were cooking together. Now, it was always on silent, face down, or in her pocket. When I once joked that her phone had become classified, she gave me a look I still remember. Flat, unreadable, almost annoyed. She laughed it off, of course, but I remember thinking, that didn't land right. Then there was the parking thing. A month ago, I came home from work early and noticed Linda's car wasn't in the driveway. Thought nothing of it. Maybe she was at the store. But later that evening, I stepped out to grab something from my trunk and saw her car parked 2 blocks down, tucked into a side street like it was hiding. When I asked about it, she said, the neighbor's kids were playing basketball in the street. I didn't want to accidentally back into them. But it hadn't rained that day, and the kids had been at school when I got home. The driveway had been clear. That one stayed with me. Not just the action, but the calm way she answered, as if she'd rehearsed it, like she was prepared. I remembered the sudden uptick in girls' nights, and how none of the names matched the people I used to hear about. She used to have this tight group from college: Elena, Sierra, Kat. Now it was always vague coworkers or new names I didn't recognize. It's just easier to get together with the office girls after work, she'd say. We all live nearby. One night, I asked if I could meet them sometime. Not as a challenge, just curiosity. She brushed it off with a laugh, calling me cute for being so clingy. I remember that word, clingy. It stung more than it should have. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how often she'd started to *p***nice humor. A quick laugh, a teasing insult, a brush on the shoulder. All just distractions, ways to keep me from looking too closely. I used to trust Linda so completely that I never questioned the details. I never followed up, never checked her location, never asked to see her texts. That kind of thing just didn't happen in our marriage. We'd always had our own space, and I'd always thought that was a sign of strength. Now, it felt like I'd given her all the cover she ever needed. And still, despite everything piling up, I said nothing. Not because I was afraid of the truth, but because I wasn't ready to hear it confirmed. Once you put something like that into words, into accusations, you can't take it back. You can't unknow it. So I sat there in the passenger seat, watching the highway roll by, heart pounding quietly under my ribs. I watched the woman I married laugh at a text message I wasn't meant to see, and I stayed silent. The car filled with the soft hum of music, and Linda began humming along, like everything was normal. And maybe to her it was, but to me, every mile we drove was just more time for the pieces to click together. More time to remember that Thursday night she claimed her phone died, and how I'd seen the little crescent moon icon. Do not disturb mode, still active when she showed me a photo from her yoga class. More time to remember how she used to kiss me goodbye every morning, but lately had rushed out the door with nothing more than a distracted, "See you tonight." More time to remember that I had felt lonely in my own home for months and hadn't understood why. It was all adding up, and by the time we pulled into the driveway of her cousin's place, I realized something terrifying. Not that she was hiding something. I already knew that. No, the scary part was how well she was doing it. I don't know what I expected to find at the party. Maybe more pretending, more smiling through clenched teeth. More of Linda acting like everything between us was exactly as it should be. That would have been easier. Familiar, even. But what I got instead was something far worse. Something I couldn't ignore, excuse, or lie to myself about anymore. We pulled up to her cousin Riley's house just after noon. The driveway was already full. Cars lined up against the curb. People wandering in and out of the front porch. Laughter spilling onto the lawn. Classic weekend family gathering. Linda was in a good mood, chatting nonstop about how she hoped her aunt hadn't made that terrible potato salad again. I barely responded. My mind was still caught in the loop of memories I'd been replaying in the car. As we stepped out, Linda reached for my hand. A casual, automatic gesture. But it felt rehearsed. Like she remembered she had to keep up appearances. I let her take it, but my fingers barely curled around hers. Inside, the house was buzzing. Her family greeted us with the usual warmth. Handshakes, hugs, loud voices talking over one another. I smiled, nodded, gave the same small answers I always did. Work's good. Yeah, still at the same place. Nope, no kids yet. We'll see. Linda, meanwhile, disappeared into the crowd like she belonged to it, which I guess she did. She had always been close with her cousins, the kind of tight-knit clan that had a million inside jokes and stories I never quite understood. Normally, I didn't mind hanging back, letting her bask in that warmth. But this time I watched her. And that's when I saw him. He was standing near the kitchen, talking with Riley and a few others. Tall, maybe a few years older than me, dressed too nicely for a backyard barbecue. Clean-shaven, sharp haircut, crisp button-down shirt. The kind of guy who stood out. Not because he was flashy, but because he wasn't trying at all. Linda made a beeline for him. No hesitation. No scanning the room first. Just a direct path through the crowd. A smile blooming across her face in a way I hadn't seen in months. She walked right up to him and touched his arm. Not a quick tap. Not friendly. Her hand lingered. He smiled and they leaned in close, too close. She whispered something in his ear, and he laughed, his hand brushing her lower back in a way that made my skin crawl. To the people around them, it probably looked innocent. Harmless flirting, maybe no one even noticed. But I saw it. I felt it. Every inch of space between them told the truth. And the truth was, my wife didn't look married. She didn't glance my way. Not once. She didn't introduce me or wave me over. She just kept her back to me like I wasn't even there. I stood by the sliding glass door that led to the backyard, half in and half out, trying to keep my breathing steady. My hands were shaking, and I didn't trust my voice enough to speak to anyone. I tried to rationalize it, even then. Maybe that was a coworker. Maybe it was an old college friend. Maybe it was nothing. But the pit in my stomach told me exactly what it was. I moved outside, blending into the crowd near the pool, pretending to be interested in someone's story about car trouble. I laughed at the right moments. I held a soda in one hand and tucked my other into my pocket to keep it from trembling. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash I had no power to stop. Eventually, I saw Linda and the man step out onto the patio together. She tossed her head back, laughing at something he said, then lightly touched his chest as she said goodbye. He walked to his car not long after. She lingered by the fence for a moment, checking her phone. I didn't approach her. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, behind a row of potted plants, watching the woman I married behave like she owed me nothing. No guilt, no hesitation, just comfort. I knew, then, with a kind of aching clarity, that this wasn't a one-time mistake. This wasn't a moment of emotional weakness. This was a pattern. A rhythm she'd settled into so smoothly that I'd stopped being part of the music altogether. It wasn't the touch. It wasn't the smile. It was the way she looked at him. Present. Like, alive. It had been months since she looked at me like that. And suddenly, the hotel receipt felt like a formality. A technicality. I didn't need it anymore. I had something stronger. The truth, staring me in the face with a hand on someone else's arm. Linda returned to the party like nothing had happened. She made the rounds, poured herself a drink, chatted with her aunts. When she finally saw me, she smiled like we hadn't spent the last hour living in different realities. "There you are," she said, walking over and slipping her arm around my waist. "You disappeared on me." I didn't say anything. She leaned in and kissed my cheek. "You okay?" I nodded, barely. She went on talking, telling me about someone's new baby or Riley's engagement. I didn't hear a word of it. I just stared at her, wondering who else knew. Wondering how long she'd been playing the part of the devoted wife while I stood offstage like a forgotten prop. Later, I caught her cousin Hannah watching me from across the yard. Her expression wasn't pity. It was more like recognition, like she knew something I wasn't supposed to. She looked away when our eyes met. That moment stayed with me longer than it should have. Because up until then, I'd thought maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I was just insecure, paranoid, broken in some quiet way. But when you start seeing it in someone else's eyes, that silent, sympathetic glance, that's when you know it's real. And when the party started winding down, and the music got quieter and people started saying their goodbyes, I made a decision I didn't expect. I stopped lying to myself. Because the truth wasn't hidden anymore. It wasn't in a phone or a locked message thread. It wasn't behind late nights and vague excuses. It was out in the open, laughing, touching, living right in front of me. And I'd been invisible through all of it. After the man left and Linda returned to her usual orbit, it was like a fog settled in around me. I stood in the backyard, surrounded by people who knew my name, knew my face, knew I was Linda's husband. But in that moment, I had never felt more alone. The strange thing about betrayal is that it doesn't explode, it seeps. It doesn't always come with raised voices and dramatic reveals. Sometimes it's quiet, subtle, like standing in the middle of a crowded backyard and realizing you're the only one not in on the joke. I tried to stay composed, tried to blend in, but everything felt off. Like I was underwater, hearing muffled laughter and music from some distant surface. Linda was making her way through the yard now, bouncing from one group to the next, chatting with cousins and friends like nothing had happened. She was in her element, laughing, flipping her hair, clinking glasses with an ease that bordered on grace. But I couldn't unsee what I saw, couldn't unfeel it. Every smile she gave someone else felt like another crack in whatever version of our marriage I'd been clinging to. She hadn't looked at me like that in, God, how long? Months? A year? I found myself lingering near the pool, pretending to admire the landscaping while a couple of older neighbors chatted beside me about backyard upgrades. I nodded where appropriate, threw in a chuckle or two, but my mind was nowhere near the conversation. I was still stuck in the kitchen from an hour ago, watching Linda place her hand on that man's chest like it belonged there. I couldn't stop thinking. Who was he? Had I seen him before? Was he the reason for the hotel receipt? Was he the reason for every sudden work dinner, every yoga class that ran late, every turned-off phone and last-minute girls' night? I looked across the yard at Linda. She was standing in a circle of 3 people, her wine glass tilted in her hand. Her posture was relaxed, confident. She wasn't checking in on me, wasn't making sure I felt included, wasn't even glancing my way. If I had walked out the front door and left, I honestly don't think she would have noticed. And that realization hit harder than anything else. Because for the longest time, I told myself we were just in a slump. That life had gotten busy. That couples hit rough patches. That the distance I felt was temporary, fixable. But this wasn't distance. This was detachment. She wasn't cold. She wasn't angry. She simply didn't seem to see me. I wandered back inside to grab a drink and maybe catch a moment alone. In the kitchen, her cousin Mason offered me a beer and started telling me about his upcoming vacation. I listened, nodded, gave short answers. Then I noticed Hannah, Linda's younger sister, sitting at the breakfast bar, sipping something pink from a mason jar and watching me. Not watching like a curious observer, watching like she knew. I met her eyes for a moment, and she gave me a tight-lipped smile. Not awkward, not friendly, something else, something knowing. I looked away. The next time I glanced back, she was still looking, and this time her expression had shifted. It was subtle but unmistakable. Sympathy, not pity, not judgment, just quiet understanding. Felt like a spotlight had suddenly been turned on. I scanned the room. Was everyone seeing it? Was I the last one to figure it out? How long had this been going on? How many people had watched her float through these events? Laughing too loudly, standing too close to someone who wasn't her husband. How many people had whispered about it after we left? How many had said nothing at all? It made my skin crawl. Back outside, I spotted Linda again. This time, she was standing with Riley and a few others, gesturing dramatically as she told some story. Everyone was laughing. The man she had been so touchy with earlier was gone, but she seemed no less lighthearted. She looked happy. Not guilty, not torn, just happy. And for a second I hated her for it. Not for cheating, not for lying, but for being so good at it. For making me feel like a fool in a house full of people who might have known something I didn't. For treating me like I was furniture. Present, useful, silent, but unimportant. I made my way to one of the folding chairs near the fence and sat down. A group of kids was chasing each other with water balloons near the garden beds. Their shrieks and laughter filled the air. Music hummed through outdoor speakers. People raised glasses and flipped burgers. It was a party, a celebration. But inside, I felt like I was watching a scene from behind glass. Disconnected, muted, not part of the story. I sat there for what felt like hours, nodding politely at whoever passed by, answering questions in short, simple phrases. No one asked where Linda was. No one commented on the distance between us. Everyone just went on like we were still what we used to be. And Linda? She didn't once come to sit beside me, didn't bring me a drink, didn't check if I needed anything, didn't ask if I was okay. It was like I wasn't even there. Eventually, Hannah walked over and sat down in the chair next to mine. She didn't say anything right away, just sipped her drink and stared straight ahead at the lawn. Then, quietly, she said, "You don't deserve this." I turned to her, startled. "What?" She sighed. "You don't. I've been watching all day. And not just today." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to ask what she meant. Part of me didn't need to. Hannah had always been different from the rest of the family. More observant, more serious. She never said more than she had to, but when she did speak, it mattered. "She's been different for a while," she continued, still not looking at me. "You've probably known longer than you want to admit." I swallowed hard. "I'm starting to." Hannah finally turned her head, met my eyes. "You don't have to stay." The words were simple, calm, but they hit with the weight of a thunderclap. She wasn't telling me to leave the party. She was giving me permission to stop pretending, to stop holding the weight of someone else's dishonesty on my shoulders. I didn't respond. I just stared at the ground, trying not to let the sudden burn in my eyes turn into anything visible. She didn't push, didn't speak again, just sat there next to me like a sentry, quietly sharing my silence. And in that moment, Hannah was more of a partner to me than Linda had been in months. Eventually, she said, "If you want to go, I'll drive." That's when I stood up. Not because I was angry, not because I wanted to cause a scene, but because staying would have meant accepting something I couldn't anymore. I'd been a ghost long enough. The decision to leave wasn't loud. It didn't come with a slammed door or raised voices. It happened quietly, with one glance exchanged between me and Hannah, and the understanding that nothing about this afternoon was normal anymore, at least not for me. We walked side by side through the yard. No one stopped us. No one asked questions. A few people glanced up, but no one really looked. Maybe they didn't care, or maybe they just didn't want to know. Linda was standing near the back patio, still laughing with her cousins. From a distance, she looked like a woman completely at ease. Shoulders relaxed, eyes glowing, wine glass in hand, the center of her little universe. She didn't even notice we were leaving. Not at first. Hannah led us through the side gate toward the driveway. Her keys were already in her hand. My chest felt tight, like I'd swallowed a stone. I could hear the soft crunch of gravel beneath our shoes and the distant thump of music behind us. But all I could think about was how quiet my own wife had become in my life. Not in volume, but in presence. And then, just as we passed the mailbox, I heard it. "Michael!" Her voice cut through the air, sharp and sudden. I turned around to see her standing at the edge of the yard, barefoot in the grass, her face twisted in confusion. "Where are you going?" she called out. I didn't answer. Neither did Hannah. We just kept walking. That's when the panic set in. Linda jogged toward us, wine glass abandoned somewhere behind her. Her perfect smile was gone. Her calm was gone. All that was left was this frantic, wide-eyed version of her I barely recognized. "Michael! Seriously, what are you doing? You can't just leave." I stopped walking, but I didn't face her yet. I needed a breath. Just one. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from the overwhelming realization that this was it. The moment, the shift. When I finally turned around, she was standing a few feet away, her arms slightly raised as if she wasn't sure whether to reach for me or brace herself for impact. "Is this about earlier?" she asked, her voice louder now, too loud. "Come on. Don't make this into something it's not." It was just, I saw you, Linda, I said quietly. The words hung there for a moment, untouched. She blinked. Saw me what? Don't, I said. Not here. Not now. Her face changed then. Not softened. Hardened. Her shoulders squared slightly, and the desperation in her voice gave way to something colder. You're overreacting, she said. You always do this. You get in your head and turn everything into. You touched him like you used to touch me. Silence. She opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out. Behind me, Hannah remained still, a calm presence in a storm I couldn't believe I was standing in. She didn't interfere. She didn't gloat or inject herself into the drama. She was just there, solid, quiet. I'm not doing this here, I said finally, and turned back toward the car. That's when Linda lost it. No, no, you don't get to just leave with her, she shouted, stepping forward. What is this? Some kind of punishment? Are you trying to embarrass me? I froze in my tracks. Embarrass you? I repeated, turning back. Linda, I stood in that yard for 2 hours while you acted like I didn't exist. While you laughed with some guy like he was your whole world and I was just background noise. If anyone embarrassed you today, it was you. She flinched like I'd slapped her. This is insane, she whispered. You're blowing everything out of proportion. Then tell me the truth, I said, stepping toward her. Who is he? Her mouth opened, then closed again. Her eyes flickered toward Hannah, then back to me. It's not what I think, not what it looks like. Haven't I heard that before? She looked down, then up again. You're not being fair. No, Linda, I said, my voice low and steady. You're not being honest. Her eyes glossed over then, and for a second, I saw something behind them. Fear, maybe. Not of me, not even of losing me, but of losing control. Of losing the script she thought she could keep writing, even as I finally walked off the stage. I turned away again and opened the car door. You're going to leave with my sister? She snapped. You'd rather leave with her than talk to me? I looked at her one last time. You had all afternoon to talk to me. You chose not to. I got in and shut the door. Hannah pulled out of the driveway slowly, and I watched through the window as Linda stood there in the middle of the lawn, barefoot and speechless. Her family was still inside, unaware, or maybe just uninterested. Either way, the party didn't stop. But for me, the show was over. As we drove down the street, I felt something unexpected. Stillness. I thought I'd be a wreck. Thought I'd be panicked or sick or broken. But instead, I felt grounded. Like I had finally put down a weight I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. Hannah didn't say much at first. She let the silence settle, and I was grateful for it. About 5 minutes into the drive, she finally spoke. You okay? I let out a slow breath. I'm not sure yet, but I think I will be. She nodded, keeping her eyes on the road. You did the right thing. I watched the houses roll by, sunlight flickering through trees. My own reflection stared back at me from the passenger side window. Tired, drawn, but not defeated. How long have you known? I asked her after a while. She hesitated. I didn't know anything for sure. I saw how she was treating you, and how different she was when you weren't looking. I nodded. You didn't deserve that, she added, her voice quiet but firm. None of it. I felt something twist in my chest. Grief, maybe, for the time I'd lost. For the love I'd given to someone who didn't know what to do with it. We rode in silence for a while longer. I stared out the window, the late afternoon sun stretching long shadows across the road. I think I needed to see it with my own eyes, I finally said. I think I needed the lie to fall apart in public. No more pretending. No more hoping she'd come back to who she was. Hannah nodded. She's not that person anymore, Michael. Maybe she hasn't been for a long time. I didn't respond right away, because she was right, and the truth of that was still sinking in. Eventually, we pulled into a quiet parking lot near a small cafe. Hannah turned off the engine but didn't move to get out. You want to sit for a bit? She asked. I nodded. We sat there with the windows down, the warm breeze drifting through. Somewhere in the distance, wind chimes rattled softly. I leaned back in the seat, eyes closed, letting the silence fill the cracks in me. And for the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for a text, or an apology, or a shift. I was just sitting, breathing, starting to feel like myself again.